Welcome to the podcast where we speak truth, illuminate power, and fully embody who the fuck we are. This is the Light Warriors Unleashed podcast. We are all about spiritual evolution, spiritual growth, talking about the things that may be controversial, even some triggering concepts, but we are all about expansion. Come on in and join us as we reclaim and recenter ourselves in the power of who we really are. We are the Light Warriors, and welcome to the revolution. Well, welcome back, everybody. Episode 126 of the Light Warriors Unleashed podcast. Okay, so I give a disclaimer at the beginning of the podcast before Michelle and I start talking, but I'm going to say it to you again. The title of this podcast is We Are Being Poisoned, and we are deep diving into the vaccination world. We're deep diving into the dentistry world. Michelle shares her potent story of healing and health and what's transpired in her life. We will be doing a second episode as well, which you guys are going to hear closer to the end of this episode. But it really is an awareness of what's transpiring at a deeper level within the collective energy of the certain systems that are trying to control the health of our bodies and our trust in the spiritual guidance. Michelle deep dives into her journey as well, into the space of, and she has been such a beautiful and authentic movement within this energetic field. And it's like, I came back home in this conversation. I aligned in this space with her in this because if you've been in my world at any point in time, you know how I feel about holistic medicine. You know that that's the route I take. You know that I have certain aspects of my life that I'm like, I would never do certain things in the medicinal world, in the medical system. I just wouldn't. And she allowed me to come play with her in this episode. So let me just read you her bio so you can get a feel for what's about to transpire. So Michelle Katz originally was from New York, moved to Los Angeles in the late 1900s to begin her career as a film and TV producer. Guys, we even talk about Hollywood and the dynamics of this work for her, if you can imagine all of the things. Over the years, she contributed to numerous high-profile shows, most notably as co-executive producer of Trial 4, an 8-part documentary series on Netflix. And in 2020, Michelle left Los Angeles and this television industry to embrace a new chapter as a full-time writer, relocating to the mountains to pursue her creative work in a more tranquil setting. An award-winning abstract painter, Michelle now shares a gallery space with two fellow artists in Idlewild, where her artwork is displayed. Her writings are featured on Substack, Broken and Healed, and she has been published in the New Earth Almanac. So Michelle recently completed her spiritual memoir, Awakening in the Age of Metals, which explores her healing journey through plant medicine, indigenous practices, and ancestral trauma. So we literally deep dive into toxicity and heavy metal poisoning. We dive into the dimensions of what's happening on the earth experience. And guys, like I said, this is an expanded truth-filled episode, and I am just so grateful to be able to serve it up to you. So no further ado, Michelle in episode 126 of Light Warriors Unleashed podcast. Okay, guys, I just want to give you the disclaimer. Put your seatbelts on and get ready, because Michelle and I are about to dive into a conversation today that some of you might be triggered by. Some of you, I really hope it gets you curious in different aspects of things. And some of you may be like on your run right now listening to this and you're like, fuck yes, because of the fact that you already know. And we're bringing this message again and again into the earth experience to help shift energies, for people to see stuff differently, for you to potentially take this and maybe make a change in your life if that's in alignment for you. So I cannot wait to lead into this conversation. Michelle, welcome to the podcast. I just want to say hi first before we dive right in.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, and I'm excited about all of this. This is stuff that I chat about, but I don't like chat about in the field of everything, meaning my mission is a bit different than yours, but yours is really potently aligned in the area of health. And I want to lead with this question, which is the title of the podcast episode, is We Are Being Poisoned. And that is something, if you actually take that into your field and really feel it, and start to really be with us in this space right now, you're going to understand what we mean by the time we're done having this conversation. So start with the journey, Michelle. Tell us about how this phrase came into your life, what transpired for you, and I will weave in around you as you start to talk to us today.
I love it. Well, let's just say that I am likely the last person who would have come to this knowledge.
Mm,
I was in a space in my life that I had worked towards my whole life. I had always dreamt of a career in film and television and
mm,
music. Entertainment was quite clearly going to be my life from the get-go. And I was making it happen. I went to college in Boston. I went to graduate school in New York, and then at that point I was like, I'm ready. So I moved out to Los Angeles. And I started at the bottom, and I started working in film and television as first an intern, then an unpaid production assistant, then a production assistant, and I went through all of the whole chain all the way up to the top. And about in 2014, I was at the very top of a network, running physical production at a small arts network in Los Angeles
mm.
that had a great opportunity for me because they were just building out their studio. So I was really in an unusual position where I could use all of my skills and knowledge that I had cultivated to that point to do this. And one day, as fate would have it, I stepped on a nail in the morning on my way to work. And I didn't really think much of it. It barely bled. I came into work a little late and I was like, sorry, you guys. You know, just stepped on a nail and had to clean it up. No biggie. And I got this like look of terror from everybody around me, including the people who were several ranks, I guess you could say, above me at very high levels, who I would consider confidants
Yeah,
and trusted.
yeah,
And they were just like horrified that I was even there, and they hadn't run at top speed to an emergency room to get a tetanus shot.
right. Yeah,
And me being the person I was at that time, I listened.
yeah,
If you wanted me to do something, I was going to do it. If it was going to make you happy, I was going to do it. If it was going to bring pleasure to a crowd, I was going to do it. Anything in any way to be a people pleaser was what I was going to do. So right after work, in my fully unconscious mode,
yeah.
uh, I got in the car and I drove to Marina Del Rey, and I walked in. Unbeknownst to the two of us, myself and the woman giving me the vaccine, I had been in a similar situation 2 years earlier when a friend was having a baby and she wanted everybody who was potentially going to hold the baby to get a Tdap shot.
Mm,
Now, I didn't know that a tetanus shot was the same thing at that point as a Tdap shot is rolled into it. I also didn't know that Tdap was one of the most sort of volatile and toxic vaccines you can get. They all are, but that's particularly nasty. So you shouldn't really be getting them so close together, nor should you be getting two, nor should you be getting any. But that's for later
yeah,
once we're
yeah.
deeper into the story. But I went, she happily gave me the shot,
Mm,
even though nobody
of
asked
course
about
she
my
did.
background.
Of
It was like
course
very
she did.
exciting.
Yeah.
uh I came home, didn't think anything of it, continued on with my life. Within a couple of days, I started to get like a really bad cold.
Mm,
And I remember going into work thinking, God, I'm so sick, but I have all this work to do. At that point, it was like, you're sick, you're working, you got to work. It wasn't
yeah,
working from home wasn't like a thing.
yeah.
So I, had this cold on and off for about 6 weeks. And then I visited my parents in Florida where they had their retirement home. And I woke up one day in their house in the guest bedroom, and it was quite literally as if a Mack truck had driven through the garage and straight into my bedroom and 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 rolled over me and stayed there.
Mm,
That's how I felt that morning. And that turned into it got considerably worse by the day and by the week. At the end of my vacation there, I could barely make it home to Los Angeles for New Year's Eve.
right.
And I could feel when that happened, when that thing settled in, that my once I think clear antenna
Yeah.
from my third eye, even though I didn't know much about spirituality then,
Yeah.
I felt creatively always very connected to the universe.
Right.
And I quite literally felt as if somebody had taken one of the like a set of pliers
Yeah.
and cut the cord that was between my third eye and the
Mm.
universe and replaced it with a metal shield that was fogged over.
Right. Yeah. Such a great description. Oh my gosh.
And I, at that point, started to degrade
Yeah.
very quickly. I soon couldn't leave my house. I became dyslexic. I became cognitively so impaired that I couldn't. I try to describe this in my book, but it's almost indescribable.
Mm.
I couldn't I couldn't process
Right.
conversations in a normal way. Like, let's say you would talk and I would effectively hear your words and put them in a container and then take that container out at a later time and take the words out and string them together in a way that I remember having known them before.
Right.
So I couldn't converse,
Mm.
with anybody. And when I did, I really kind of made pleas for help to friends and family in the only way I knew how. But I think the first big trauma of this, other than getting sick, was the look in the eyes of the people around me, because I suddenly saw like a ghost, like everybody in my world became like paper dolls, like they weren't
Right.
there anymore.
Interesting.
They
Yeah.
were just gone. There was nothing
Yeah.
happening. I would say, like, I'm really, really sick. And I went to 18 doctors in Los Angeles, and they all pretty roundly dismissed me. The only thing they had to say was, we checked your labs and your thyroid is off, so you must have hypothyroidism and it's not going to get better. So here's a pill. And any pill I took, because when you have mercury poisoning, your gut becomes shredded.
Mm.
You can't digest foods. So the only foods I could digest, according to these allergy tests, were cranberries, green beans, and sardines. That was the only three foods in the world that the test said that I could digest.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Um, I would have a bite of something and like collapse into like a ball of pain and confusion. And if it had gluten or grains or sugar in it, I would get a migraine and be in bed crying for days.
Mm.
So
Crazy, right? Oh my gosh. Just the
that was
dynamics of all of this. Like it's just and like there's so much to dissect into this. And I've got a potent question, but I don't want to ask it yet because there's some stuff you need to tell us first before I can ask this question. So because it's like I know the story already, So I'm like, oh, I don't want to skip
you
ahead.
know where this all goes.
Yeah. So we're in a shitstorm. Nobody can help us in the medical facility. Everyone's saying it's stupid bullshit and they can't figure it out. So what happens next? So you keep what? What do you keep doing? What's happening in your world?
So everything inside and outside is falling apart, right?
Right.
I live alone. I don't have, my family is from the East Coast. So I'm from the East Coast and they're all there. And once again, I couldn't really get their attention
Hmm.
on this. I got to observe, sadly, and this is a very important piece of the story, and I don't know if we're ready for it yet, but my family trauma, the traumatic story that I come from is that, and this does play into what I discovered when I ultimately left the country, went to the jungle, and took a very deep dive into um, the roots of my ancestral trauma. But both my parents are Holocaust survivors, right?
Mm.
So I grew up, and both my brothers are significantly older than me, to the point where they grew up in sort of a different generation, and they're men. So I grew up in so much trauma. I think, and so much unspoken pain
Yeah.
that there never has really been a way for me to communicate the
Mm,
level of sensitivity and the level of emotions and the level of kind of awareness, that I was born with and came into. And so there was always this incredible, like, dark space and cloud between
no, I
myself
imagine.
and the rest of my family. So in a way, this intensified the whole problem.
Right.
This made it absolutely impossible for me to even step into the character
Right.
that I had been in for so many years, because they can understand you live in Los Angeles. They can understand you work in Hollywood. They can understand,
Yeah.
you go to Hawaii on vacation once in a while. They can understand those things. But when you start saying, I am so sick that I've gone to $18 doctors and I can't swallow anything and I can't process any information and I can't work anymore and I can't leave my house. This is not a conversation you have with, with people like that. You
Yeah.
just can't.
Yeah. Yeah. They just
Um,
couldn't accept it for sure.
no,
No.
it was not within the realm of, so I was truly, for a long time, I was truly on my own. And the maybe it's because I am a writer, I suddenly had this lens on of, like, I write about this in my book, and my wife had reminded me recently that there is a great episode in the Twilight Zone where this woman was being put into, like, a mental hospital because she didn't want the pig face that all the rest of the people in society had. Everybody in society had a pig face, and
Right.
she had a normal face, and they were, like, drugging her up and, like, committing her to this institution. And it was kind of like, with dramatically within a few months of me getting that mercury poisoning, which what I understood 3 years later was happening to my brain.
Yeah.
It was only until that happened that I began to see through this filter of, oh my God, everybody around me has a pig face and they
Mm.
want me to have one too. And I'm trying to articulate that I don't want one, that I
Yeah.
just want to be myself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
crazy.
that
It's
was,
crazy. Yeah, the whole thing. And like I know we're gonna deep dive into some of this toxicity stuff that's going on and you're recognizing of it, but it's like, so you're alone, you've been to 18 doctors, shit's hit the fan in all aspects of your life. You don't have any family around to support you. What's the next where did this opening come into play? Like what moved through you next? Was it like an intuitive hit? Did you meet someone that said something? Like where does it all connect? Because obviously you're talking, you're here, you're like years later wrote a book about, like, we know something happened. So now I'm like, give me the juice. Where's the juice? Like, yeah.
so it started, I would say ground zero is January 2014, right? So all of 2014 and all of 2015, I was in this horrendous
Yeah.
state of mind, body, and literally no spirit.
Yeah.
Um, Simultaneously, and this is a very important piece of the story, my father was dying.
Mm.
And
Mm.
again, my father had unprocessed trauma
Of
from
course.
his childhood during the Holocaust, and he was also a very heavy drinker, and that's really how he coped with the chaos and horror of his childhood. So I wouldn't say that I got the benefit of a lot of knowledge about what he went through. I know what he went through, but I don't know how he went through it.
Yeah.
And so he had COPD, clearly all his grief was in his lungs.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to, even though I was so sick, I had to get myself, on a plane to Florida. And at this time, I had a cyst on my back that, in hindsight, I think I realized had become infected and was an
Mm.
abscess. And it was about the size of a golf ball.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I couldn't really lean back on the plane. I had to sit up, and I didn't really care about it because, quite frankly, at that point, I assumed and hoped that I would die, that I was,
Yeah. Oh,
there was no other path for me other than death. I just didn't know when it was going to be.
right. Yeah.
So I flew in that kind of, like, state, and in retrospect, having talked to other friends and family members, they were like, you looked really skinny and really green and really scary. Although nobody told me that then. So I didn't really know how like bad it was. And my father was in hospice inside our home in Florida. So he was in a home office and he was literally dying. And I had this thing on my back. So as it turned out, my brother, who is a retired neurologist, saw the thing popping out of my shirt
Yeah.
from across the kitchen. And he came over and he pulled my shirt back and said, you got to the hospital. And I was like, I do. And he was like, yeah, that doesn't look good. So off we went with my father. And I think they had said he has about 24 hours left
Wow.
to live. So now here I am going to the emergency room. They looked at it and said, ooh, yeah, that looks bad. Let's give you some antibiotics and come back tomorrow. So simultaneously, my father, I was in the room with him
Yeah.
when he took his last breath. And I do remember what it sounded like and
Yeah.
how it felt. And then seemingly, it's a little bit of a blur, but I'd say within the next couple of hours, I was in the ER and I was face down and they were slicing open this thing on my back and draining it. And I felt this presence, above me.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's my father. And he's taking me.
Right.
He's guiding me.
Yeah.
And little did I know he'd never be ready to guide me at that at that moment. Like he was being guided himself. But I thought, oh my God, oh my God. But in fact, we'll get to this part of the story a little bit later because it's really intricate and it comes out through my years of plant medicine, what
Right. I figured.
actually happened to myself and my father in that moment. But
Yeah.
got it drained, got it cut open, got it sorted out. We went back to Sit Shiva in New York,
Hmm.
and I continued to be in really bad shape and going downhill. But within the next couple of months, I felt different guidances and different messages coming in that I believe now were my father,
Mm.
um, because he had passed and now there was a situation on the other side that I was somewhat picking up on, and I was led to a podcast. And remember, there wasn't a lot of information out there at all.
Yeah.
I would scour the internet for hours and hours and hours and hours, and the only thing that
Mm.
would ever come up was like, yeah, I had Hashimoto's, or yeah, I had celiac disease, cut out gluten. Like that was the only thing I could really find. Nobody was like, I have
Talking about
dementia and I'm bedridden and I can't speak and
it. Yeah.
nothing like that. So I was led to this podcast. I found out about a doctor in Austin, Texas. She talked about all the things I have.
Yeah.
And a friend, my one friend who was really kind of helping to take care of me at that time, got me on a plane.
Mm.
She got me safely to Austin.
Yeah.
That woman, who's a functional doctor, who I had no idea what a functional doctor even was at that time,
Right.
she took a mercury test. She took a provoked urine test.
Mm.
She looked at it and said, in all of my years of being a doctor, I have quite literally never seen mercury levels this high. What happened?
Wow.
And I thought, what happened? I've had silver at the time. I had silver fillings since I was like 8 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and they never put a problem.
Yeah.
So I went on this journey, and I got my fillings replaced. Within 24 hours of getting those fillings out, almost all my brain symptoms cleared.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I got my root canals out. And within about 6 months of that happening, I could go back to the gym and lift weights.
Wow.
Then I got my cavitations cleared up again in Texas, which are infections in the jaw that anybody who has a chronic illness would need and want to look into, because often they happen from wisdom tooth extractions that aren't done correctly. And so bacteria builds up and it goes straight to the brain. So anything that is going on in the jaw or the teeth is going to infect the brain.
Right.
Um, so I got those taken care of in 2019, and my brain sort of fully cleared after that, and I had full, like my whole full and better, like I was beyond, I think, in a lot of ways, because I
Yeah.
had already done so much plant medicine that my third eye had really re-cleared and reopened and decalcified, and I was now, at least cognitively, not physically, but cognitively, at least I had my spirit back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I
You can
knew
connect
that
back
the
in.
guidance was going to be coming in and that everything else would follow.
Yeah, I want to highlight one of the key points that you said that is so probably natural for you to say, but like one of the key elements of this whole thing is like you landed on a podcast. A podcast came into your awareness. Something said to you to go here, and this podcast made itself available. And this is the root of our expansion on Earth. This is the actual keys that are showing up in our world in small ways. Like you wouldn't think that clicking on a podcast could change your whole life, right? You wouldn't think that reading that book or doing the action that sign on the side of the road says to you, or trusting to go to the grocery store today at this time when you're being pinged to go at this time could change your life. But it's these small things that are huge assets in the movement, right? So you didn't listen to that many podcasts. All of a sudden, this podcast makes itself aware to you that changed the whole course of your life. Just crazy, right?
And saved my life. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no doubt that my organs were shutting down because I had been in the ER just a couple of weeks before I went to Austin, and I had a liver injury, and I was really, really, really in bad shape. And in fact, this is sort of like a horrifying and humorous anecdote, because once I got at the ER, they were like, go back to your general doctor. I was like, okay. And so I went to my general doctor, and he was like, why'd they take all these tests? I was like, I don't know, because I'm sick. And he was like, all right, like really mad. And then he looked at them and he said, well, we'll do a liver panel. And they misdiagnosed me with Hep C.
Oh my God.
So for about a week, I thought I had hepatitis C, and he thought I was an intravenous drug user. So his treatment of me went from really kind of normal, although not really normal, but sort of normal for a conventional doctor,
Yeah.
to like barely even making eye contact with me. And I was like, wait a minute, what is happening? Like, what portal did I step through to be in this world? Like, how did I go from being like a well-respected Hollywood producer in
Yeah.
this very 3D world that I totally understood, to suddenly being accused of being an intravenous drug user and in and out of the ER? It humbled me. It humbled me in such an incredible way that I hope will never change, because, and I don't think it will, because I realized we're all the same.
Yeah.
There's
We are.
no titles or fancy cars or bank accounts or anything that changes the human experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're all going through our stuff, learning our lessons, moving through the stuff we need to in order to be able to serve humanity into the highest vibrational light. That's really what's transpiring, right? And we all have our
Absolutely.
piece to the puzzle, and some of it's really dynamic, you know? So, like, I want to ask you this question because obviously we know you didn't go back into TV land.
I did.
You did. Okay, so tell us because there's a really good question I have to ask about this. So go ahead. So you go get healed, you now can think properly, you're moving through life. How does this connect back into play for you?
So I get my dental work done. I can use my brain again. I can start working out again, but I'm really still physically very ill because, that stuff does so much damage,
Oh yeah.
and it takes a long time for that damage to be unwound. Oh, hi, Kitty. I have a kitty too. I told her not to come up during this interview, and it seems like she listened.
Yeah, this is her throne. So she sits on this desk and she's a healer. So she participates in everything, like all the
Oh,
time. And sometimes
I
I
love it.
channel through her. I'm like, what do you have to say? And she'll like beep, 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 and she'll literally talk out loud and then I'll translate it to people. It's really kind of
Oh,
fun.
they're such ascended masters,
Oh
cats.
yeah, I know. Like, yeah.
Um, yeah, so okay, so we're talking, it was late 2016 when all the dental work started happening. I hooked up with a mercury detox coach in Florida who was instrumental,
Mm,
and she had her own like horror story of being poisoned through dental work.
yeah.
Um, which is often dental work. In my case, it was vaccine. but dental work and vaccines and food, and we can get into all the different ways that we're currently absorbing toxins that the body is no longer able to handle. And so, as we know now, the digestive system of most, at least Americans, and I would say, I would venture to say most Westerners,
Yeah.
has changed to the point where nobody can really eat anything and be okay.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's a major problem. So
Yeah.
I didn't understand all these pieces, at that point. I just understood my brain is better so I can live again. I
Right.
can actually, as sick as I am, as tired as I am, as achy as I am, even though I'm on thyroid meds, even though my body's not working the way it should, I have the most important piece, which is my intuition has come back, my
Hmm.
pineal gland has opened, and my cognitive functioning has expanded so I can work again, because in my work, really the most important thing was using my brain.
Yeah.
So I tried to do some consulting here and there, but as the time wore on into 2017, and I wasn't really getting like as well as I had hoped, and TV work was not, I knew that it was not my path.
Hmm.
I just got a hit. I don't even really know where it came from, but I just knew it was time to leave Los Angeles, pack up my house, rent it out so that I could get some income and leave. And my idea was for some reason to go to Bali. And I
Yeah.
felt I'm going to go to Bali and I'm going to find an old ancient Baliing healer in a cave somewhere, and he's going to know everything about me, and he's going to know everything about what I had to do. So that was
I love it.
my my crazy harebrained scheme of following, these sort of random thoughts that were dropping in. So I closed up my house, I rented it. I went to the East Coast. My mother was still living in my childhood home in Staten Island. And I ended up having to live there and get stronger, um,
Mm.
and and find more money, because
Yeah.
I didn't have the funds to go to Bali. And so I got a TV job there for about 6 months on a really bad show that was kind of like one of the, strangest production experiences I had. And I was also still like, now I was in the place where I was chelating metals, and I was really, healing the gut, and I was starting to get deeper into the parasite cleansing. And so
Mm.
I was working this production job, but taking this whole suitcase of supplements and parasite cleansers and chelators and all this stuff to work. So it was really, and of course the whole world around me was like eating pizza and cookies, and it's New York and bagels, and I have a real long-standing food addiction, and I would say food sort of trauma, because
Mm.
in my childhood the only thing that really brought me any comfort was food.
Right. Yeah.
So to me, slowly having to give up every food I ever loved was basically having to give up every piece of love and comfort I ever had.
Right.
And being thrown back into the fire of my childhood for these 6 months was otherworldly
Oh,
for
I bet.
me. It
Yeah.
was really, and again, family came and went, but I was kind of like living in the basement. And it
Mhm.
was sort of my worst nightmare, I guess you could say, because I was in my late 40s at the time, and I was like, oh my God, I am terrified and horrified that all of my life of getting away and running and traveling and doing and just getting out of all this has brought me right back into the epicenter of everything I was running away from. How is this possible?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Mm.
out of the clear blue sky, an old friend, yes, who I wasn't quite friends with anymore. We had had a falling out, and I generally didn't pick up his phone calls, but for some reason, it was a 3-1 area code. I thought maybe this is work. Let me just pick it up. And he had been an addict,
Right.
and he proceeded to explain to me that he did an ayahuasca ceremony, and he cleared up his addiction, and he fell in love, and now he was getting married. And I thought to myself, is this like a prank call? Like, this is not you.
Yeah.
This is this is not you. And if it is you, whatever that ayahuasca stuff is, I need it.
Yeah.
I,
Yes. So fun.
And then within a couple of days, I had found the retreat that I was going to go to.
Yeah.
And
Where did you
I
go? Where did you go? What part of the world called to you?
I went to a beautiful place called Nimiakaya,
Yeah.
which is right outside Pucallpa,
Hmm.
right on the edge of the Amazon jungle.
Yeah.
Um,
So you got the
again,
real ayahuasca. Like you didn't get the like makeshifted, we've got 5 countries in this. We think this is ayahuasca energy. You were in the pure Amazonian jungle with the root of ayahuasca.
it was
Yeah.
again, I grew up in Staten Island. My
Yeah.
parents were immigrants.
Yeah.
I lived my whole life in Hollywood working. I was a musician and a songwriter and creative, and I think that's where my creativity came from. But I literally knew nothing about any of this. And I was still at the point where I was like, am I going to live? Maybe not. So maybe I'll
Right.
go down there and die. I don't know. I'm open.
Yeah.
I
I'm
was,
not into it.
I
I'm
was,
here. I'm being called. The grandmother is stepping up and she's calling me to her. Yeah, here we
I
are.
was like,
Yeah.
whatever happens, happens. I gave it the good old college try to get better. And if this ends in, me sort of dying in the Amazon jungle, then that's where it ends. But it has to go someplace from here because this is not okay.
Yeah.
Like what's happening to my body and what's still happening to my body and in my life, I'm at a dead end. There's a brick wall in front of me. And so
Right.
I have to do something radical because what happened to me is radical and it clearly calls for a radical
Yeah.
solution.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I got on a plane and it was very scary because I hadn't flown out of the country in the shape I was in
Right.
um, at all. And I was like,
Hmm.
really scared. And then halfway through the flight down there, I started sneezing uncontrollably. I'm like, are you kidding? I have a cold. But what I understood was happening was that the medicine was starting to work on
Work.
me on the
Yeah.
plane ride down.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And that's the end of the first chapter and the beginning of everything.
Yeah. So did you go back to Hollywood after this ayahuasca ceremony?
Well, what was
Or to
interesting is
be?
that I knew that I didn't want to go back to LA until I had some resolution,
Right.
until I cleared up whatever this health piece was that was I it's hard to explain. I knew I didn't want to go back and live that life.
Right.
So I could only go back if I was bringing with me another life. But what did happen was I got a big Netflix job that was in Boston, which is also really
Mm.
interesting because it was where I went to college and it was where my whole family now lives. So now I was being forced after Peru.
Mm.
Not only did I go to Staten Island where I grew up, but now I was being sent to the place where in some ways a lot of my trauma started, my wrong path started, which was in college when I was just going down on the wrong road and I
Yeah.
had a lot of sort of darkness and secrets from my college years that I hadn't confronted yet, and I had my family that I hadn't been able to be really open or close with yet. So what did the university do? They said, you're going to get a job. It's not going to be in LA, but it's going to be in Boston.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, any place but Boston. And so as fate would have it, I did these ceremonies, which we'll get into. And then I went and opened a door to do right afterwards. It was sort of like one thing after another just opened up and I did the ceremonies and that opened me up into massive awakening. And then right from there, I went to Florida and I did Bufo and that opened me up to
Yeah.
more massive awakenings. And then I did Combo and that opened me up to even a deeper level of purging and detoxification. And then I got on a plane and I went to Boston and I started this big show that I didn't know if I could handle,
I was
but
just gonna say, like
it
that's
was,
the question I have is like the duality of the Hollywood tell like it's all the elitists that are controlling mechanism and you're knee deep in it. And
yeah,
and they're tied to the pharmaceutical companies that want to control the world and you're knee deep in that. And then you're trying to make that work. And I'm like, it's almost like you had to be taken out of the industry with this huge health thing in order for you to be shaken open. Like that's really the question was like, Because I'm like, did you go back? How did you go back? You know, like I'm like in the space of like,
I
I'm just
know.
curious. Yeah.
It was crazy because I didn't think I'd ever go back, but I also knew I didn't really have any skills yet at the time to make a
Mm,
living. And this job came up, and it was sort of like, in many ways, it was a dream job because they paid for my housing, they paid for my per diem. It was a documentary about something that was really a very, I think, interesting and meaningful subject. So it kind of checked all the boxes. It was kind of
mm,
like, you can't turn this down. So I thought, okay, one last hurrah.
yeah.
Let me go back. And as fate would have it, a few months after I moved there, I met my wife, Kate.
I knew that. Like I was like, I could feel that already. I was like, oh, she totally met her wife there too. It's so like the whole thing was all intricately designed. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, it was so shocking the way we met and that we did even meet because I was still recovering physically. So I really just had enough energy to go to work. And if I had a shoot on the weekend, I would sort of harness all my energy. And then, I ate like kind of a crazy person compared to the people who lived there. And it was not even thought in my mind that, and I was temporary. I knew I was going back to Los Angeles at some point,
Yeah.
or at least that I was leaving Boston. I knew I
Yeah.
wasn't going to be living there. And then through very unusual circumstances,
Like always.
we met,
Yeah.
and she was on her own, I would say, shamanic initiation journey,
Yeah.
awakening, opening. And it was, we've just been together in so many lifetimes, in so many ways, in so many
Yeah.
facets that it was immediate. And I was like, what do you want to do? And she was like, I'll move back to LA with you.
Of course you. Of course. Yeah. It can be easy. That's the thing too. It can actually be easy. It's just that,
Yeah,
our lifetimes and the stuff we've been through has showed us it's got to be hard, but it actually
right.
can be easy.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm not a person who's used to it being easy, and I would take responsibility for the fact that my mind has made it
Mm,
harder in
yeah.
many ways over the years than it has to be.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I want to lead us back because I know like we could do multiple episodes on this podcast because there's so much that we can move within, like even just the plant medicine journeys and what transpired there. But I do want to get into the root because I think this is for this episode at least, it's imperative for us to talk about this toxicity stuff that's moving through the collective and
Yeah,
like how it's taken people out like this in this experience, but it's also heightened so much right now. And there is so much shit, like you said it before, that's being pumped into these human forms. Like
yeah,
I live in a country where I literally eat off the trees. Like
yeah.
it's a whole, like my whole entire world shifted when I moved here 2.5 years ago. And it's like, I get where I live. I understand that like the woman who cultivates the shiitake mushrooms and the oyster mushrooms sings to them every day. And that
Oh,
vibration
yeah.
moves through like I get where I live, I understand, but I also choose to live here. I chose to show up. I chose to make that decision for myself. And it's a bit challenging in North America, especially in North America, because it's all the shit is freaking pumped up with all this bullshit, right? So I'd love for you to tap into this in whatever way you want to go, because I feel like there's a really potent message for humanity inside of all of this. And yeah,
I'm glad that you mentioned that. I noticed it when I went to Costa Rica too. There was this vibe and this energy. I mean, the food we ate was just so incredible, and it felt so alive. And
yeah.
um, just recently, to as a portal to get into this subject, I just came off of a 61-day juice fast.
Mm,
So all I did for 61 days is drink juice and clean out on the deepest levels the waste and the mucoid plaque and all of the things that line the guts of all, I would say, all of humanity, but more dramatically, Westerners, North America, all the people who've been eating the foods that we're eating, because the food that we're eating it comes from the toxicity comes from absolutely everywhere. So you've got chemtrails,
right.
right? And the chemtrails are spraying barium, aluminum, mercury, cadmium, so we think, oh, we're eating organic. No, you're not. You're
Yeah.
eating something that has a label of organic, and
Yeah.
God willing, the farmers are treating it with a little bit more sensitivity than your conventional produce, but in no way is that organic, because there are chemtrails. Unless your crops are covered, it's being exploited and tainted by these chemicals. So that's very important, because we all have heavy metal poisoning to one degree or another. Granted, most people don't have perhaps the as dramatic a story as I do, but the fact that we have such an explosion in dementia and Alzheimer's proves without any, beyond any shadow of any doubt, because that is mercury poisoning, that we're
Mhm.
all getting it from somewhere on levels that are far, far exceed what's safe. So we know it's in the water, we know it's in the air, we know it's in the food, we know there's glyphosate in the food, which is carcinogenic and causes all sorts of childhood disease. We know for a fact now that autism is caused by vaccines. We
Yeah.
know that all of that evidence and all of that, those peer-reviewed research, all of it has been buried, and hopefully will become more unburied as the days and weeks and months progress. But you have parents and family members that are in trauma because they spend their whole lives doing what I did for 11 years, which is healing the gut, chelating, making sure that your food is clean, or as clean as possible, getting water filters, getting filters for your shower, getting filters for this. You have to essentially create a multi-layered, complex shield of filtration
Mm.
around your world,
Right. It's crazy.
because it's coming from everywhere, and it's has sped up quite a bit, in the past few years. So instead of seeing chemtrails and scare every once in a while in the sky, you're seeing it every day. You're seeing it 5 times a day, 10 times a day. In Southern California, it's nonstop,
Oh yeah. It's
you
nonstop.
know?
Yeah.
So there really is, um, I mean, I feel like our lives are an exercise, a consistent exercise in battling what comes in and making sure that we are eating the cleanest foods possible. But we don't have a farm,
Yeah.
and we don't grow our own food. And I think that the closest you can get to eating clean is growing your own food. But once again, corruption comes in many forms.
Oh yeah.
And the forms in this world that we live in, that it comes in, is what is ingested in the body, because you have fluoride, which closes up the pineal gland, seals it up, right?
Hmm.
So that is going to shut off your communication with spirit. It's going to dumb you down. It's going to create neurodegenerative diseases, and does factually. So it's literally everywhere. And in fact, and I will announce this here because I've written a Substack on it. What most people don't know, which I just found out the hard way, is that even in our dental anesthesia now, we have discovered that
Mm.
graphene oxide, which was the material that was in
Mm.
vaccines, is now being found in anesthesia. So if you go in to get a simple cavity done or root canal done and you need anesthesia, guess what's going to be in there? The material, the
Mm.
dangerous, dangerous material that is in the mRNA vaccines, is now in these anesthesia. So talk about really covert sort of measures to get these toxins into the daily lives of people.
Yeah. It's really messed up what's transpiring here. And we have a dentist here in Costa Rica that literally asks you if you want anesthetics when she's going in to do a cavity. And
Wow.
it's a whole holistic thing. And in your mind, you're like, well, I don't want to feel like that, like, all that stuff and that energy, right? And but then you're thinking about it now and you understand why intuition is guiding her to ask you the question.
Oh,
It
wow.
depends where they're getting their sources from. And this is such a really important thing from the dental side, because the mouth obviously plays out a role in the whole entire body. And there's other ways that we can move this energy through and how we can shift this in other holistic ways if we believe that we can and we get the right supplementation that can actually remove the toxicity from the mouth. But it's like so interesting, the whole conversation about this. Like they're like, we can't get them in the mRNA vaccines and they're filtering their water and they're buying from local farmers that don't toxic and like all the things, then how the fuck else can we get them? And they're
Well,
trying to figure it out. Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of like, the levels of awakening I've gone through never cease to amaze me, and quite frankly, never cease to stop, because this was a recent discovery. My wife and I had some dental work last November, and she started to have all these symptoms after her dental work. And then a few months later, I got a Substack with the article and the study done at the University of Colorado Boulder. And I thought, you are kidding me. Like, we spend our lives, cleaning up, cleaning house, cleaning the food, cleaning the body, cleaning the gut. And we chose, of course, not to get that vaccine. And yet it seems like people are getting forced vaccinated in a way, by just getting simple dental work. And even when my dentist called the manufacturer and said, like, hey, one of my clients is concerned, what's in your anesthesia? And he thought it's going to be a simple answer, right? Because I'm the dentist and I'm buying this stuff. And they actually wouldn't disclose it, which
Yeah, of
tells you a
course.
lot.
Yeah, of course they wouldn't. Oh my gosh, that's crazy, right? So like, and this is the thing that I really want people to recognize and realize, it's happening everywhere. Now, there's a couple things that you can do. Obviously, grow your own food, start to buy from local people, markets. Like um, this is really kind of fun that I'm wearing this today, is my copper, like copper energy, we'll call it.
Yeah.
And we've got guys that make pyramids here, and that you can actually put a clearing energy through the copper wiring, and it will clear environments. And we've tested it here because last year they started spraying some of the sky, and we could see it and feel it. Not like chemtrails. It was different. And there was one night I went out with my dog around 3 o'clock in the morning. He had to go to the bathroom, and I could smell chlorine in the rain.
Oh,
So I
wow.
knew something was transpiring. So my girlfriend Laura, who's a really amazing friend of mine, just literally kept this copper wire activated through this environmental clearing, and with a really intense intention. And we started to see the skies part and the clouds move through this. And they're planting them under all the 5G towers in this country. They're moving copper all over, and it blocks radiation. So therefore, it also clears environmental energies. So there's stuff that we can start to play with, that because when there's a problem, there is always a solution, and multiple solutions, because it
Yeah.
can't be created otherwise. There has to be the yin and yang of energies. We just have been conditioned to not see the solutions here. So how do we combat these mRNA vaccines? How do we combat the chemtrails? There's ways around all of this. And now we're finally, yeah, awakening to it. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And I guess we can't really talk about this without the censorship piece, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, because the most potent way to keep people in the dark and more able to be controlled,
Yeah.
is through information.
Of course. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then people become sort of slaves to that information, and it becomes a program, and programs can be very difficult. And I know in my own journey, I was not interested in a new program. I just wanted my old program. It was like being addicted to the master,
Right. Yeah.
and I didn't want something new, and it was cracked open and there was this emptiness, and I just wanted what was familiar, which was the program, and I didn't want new information. I didn't, but I also was being shown that I would die a horrible death if I, very unknown, uh strange way, and what was spiritual was invisible, and what was invisible was scary, and I was really
Mm,
lost and mired down in this quagmire of like confusion as to how I could have been gotten it so wrong for so many years, and untangling that knot and that piece of
mm,
censorship, and going down these deep dark rabbit holes of finding interviews, and podcasts and things that had almost been like lost to history, lost in
yeah.
the ethers of censorship, and tracking them down and buying books that were banned, and
Yeah.
really understanding that we can't possibly be well on
Mhm.
any level, in any considerable way, in any meaningful way, until we have the truth.
Right.
We just can't.
We can't. And we're discovering it more and more. We're remembering it more and more. We're seeing it more and more. come through. And I think the real key though is that like inner trusting that you're moving through. Like that podcast episode, oh, we're freezing here for a second, but that podcast episode that landed in your field, it was like that trust of that, you know, you trusted to hit play. And those are the imperative movements we're moving through right now. I don't know why we're freezing. Hopefully can you hear me okay? Okay, yeah. I think I'm back now. Were you able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I think we're gonna get it fine. It's all good. I'm being told everything's cool. So I'm listening to all the coolness. Um, okay, so there's two other questions I want to ask you because I want you to come back. I want us to do another episode about the whole plant medicine stuff and the
Oh
spiritual
yeah.
awakening and all that, because that's a whole episode on its own. But we got to
Yeah.
complete this cycle about you with the cyst in surgery and the guardian angel that came in that you thought was your dad at the time, but which wasn't your dad. So give me the Coles Notes version on that and we can dive. So for all you guys listening, we'll dive back into it in the next episode where Michelle and I get back together. But just so we can close the loop, because I don't want to leave everyone hanging. You know, like
It is somewhat of a spiritual cliffhanger.
yeah, and seriously, I'm like, don't worry, we'll get back into that. But I just want to like make sure they get a little piece, you know?
Well, to give you the Cliff Notes version, when I was in that emergency room and I felt that spirit hanging over me, I don't know exactly what transpired, but what happened is that I discovered throughout many years of doing medicine that basically, long story short, and we'll get more into it when I talk about each individual ceremony.
Yeah.
But when I went into the medicine, it became obvious that my father's consciousness was inside of me. So he had latched onto me
Yeah.
when I was in that emergency room and also with him when he died, because I was so open and I was so vulnerable and I didn't really I was in an in-between place myself. I was hanging in limbo
Yeah.
between the earth and the beyond myself.
Yeah.
And in that place we could cross over together.
Right.
Essentially, we almost in hindsight, through all of my plant medicine work and all of my shamanic work, in hindsight, we had a shared death. So every time I went into medicine, he came out and I relived all of his trauma during the Holocaust. And I saw and I smelled and I felt all the things I had no idea about that he had repressed.
Right. So interesting. I I totally get this. I've cleared what we call earthbound spirits in people's energy fields just like this, where usually it's more traumatic incidents, like not usually when they're going through death, like it's trauma, more accident prone, where then the spirit latches into people that they loved because they just don't know where to move or go. But
Yeah.
there's a whole obviously mission with what that was about for you guys that's deeper rooted, that's really more expansive. But when I was 18 months old, I allowed a spirit to come into my energy. And it wasn't until I was 28 that I understood that that spirit was there. So
Oh,
he,
wow.
and he had a lower vibration than me. I was like this baby vibrating over 500 on the like scale of consciousness. And when he came into my field, I dropped to 180. And I was always asking my mom, like, do you remember me as a kid being like super like happy and then all of a sudden being like not? And she doesn't because she wasn't consciously aware at the time. But literally, one of the programs I teach is called the 12 Veils of Illusion. And it was a process I took for a year of removing these veils. And he was the last veil to be removed. And he literally was operating my body, like completely diminishing my soul in the space of it, like I was him. And like the whole
Wow.
mechanism of the whole thing. So I get it. Like I consciously
Wow.
understand. Yeah.
I don't think I ever would have it took me years because of my consciousness and because of the
Yeah.
level of, awareness I had spiritually. It took me years to finally accept that there was and it took many like death doulas and other people I was working with to really be able to connect me to that intuitive knowing and help me accept it so that we could release him.
Yeah. Well, and it does take that. And if you have any fear at all, because some people fear it, they're like, well, he's going to leave. It's like, well, he's taking your energy right now. Like you can tap into him at any time in another way. Like he doesn't have to be like embedded in your field, you know? So yeah, there's
Yeah.
powerfulness there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I know we're going to get back together and I know we're going to talk more about all the things,
Sure.
but I want people to know, like, where can they find you? What do you got going on right now? We got a book that's coming out soon. We got stuff happening in the world. What is up? So, like, give us the gist.
Okay. So now that I've completed this juice fast, which was really transformational,
Yeah.
really absolutely wildly incredible, I have stepped into more formally coaching people.
Okay. Yep.
So I have a Substack called Broken and Healed, and that's where
Mm.
I document my entire story. So I talk about the plant medicine, and I talk about glyphosate, and I talk about fluoride, and I talk about the politics of the truth, and the politics of food, and chemtrails, and my spiritual journey, and all of it. All of it's in there. It's called Broken and Healed, and it's www.michellekatz.substack.com, and maybe we can put that in the show
Yeah.
notes.
Of course. Yep.
um I also became a abstract painter during my
Mm.
self-healing time when I moved up to Idlewild, because I needed a modality while I was in transition between the work I did and the work I'm going to be doing, which was
Yeah.
really writing this book this whole time. And so the abstract painting ended up clearing up a lot of my physical pain. When I painted,
Shocking.
I went to a theta state. And so now when I paint, I'm able to transmit a lot of healing through my paintings, almost like Reiki. And so that website is www.michellekatz. I'm sorry, www.michellekatzart.com, and probably more up to date is my Instagram
Yeah.
at Michelle_O_Katz. And that's where my whole entire catalog is, and you can see what's for sale and what's been sold. And yeah, so I'm moving into coaching people to find their own stuck truth that's the barrier in between them and their most realized health. So we do it all. We do nutrition, detoxification, mind, body, spirit healing, belief systems, all of that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all because we go through our stuff to teach from it. So that's why we're actually here. And then we integrate it authentically. And then now we're that vibrational alignment to help others do the same thing. So beautiful, expanded. I'm not surprised. Art, like I said to one of my clients before, I'm like, you create portals in your art. Do you know that? Like you literally can, people can be taken into this joy and pleasure through your art. And it wasn't until years later that she understood what that really meant. So I get I get the whole expression. Like everything you talk about, I'm like, yeah, this is the thing. This is
Yeah,
totally the thing.
it was real shock to me, and I was creative, but like I just didn't understand why something would be calling me to do something like paint when I had really never done it before. But I'll send you a painting I sold recently called Buiti, which
Hmm.
was something that I was able to finish after my iboga ceremonies in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
The painting was only half done, and I didn't know why. And then I came back from my ceremony, and while the medicine was still in me for those 6 months, I finished this painting, and a friend of mine who's a healer and a facilitator with psilocybin looked at it and she said, "That's a transmission, and I need it." And so she bought it and took it home.
Of course. It all, but everything is. And that's the thing I really want everyone to understand. It's like we're not just on this earth to be a human on this earth. Like there's energy that moves through us, vibration. When we move through something, we create in whatever aspect of our life, whether that's through lovemaking or whether that's through, how we show up and cook in our world, how we parent, how we are in life. It's in all aspects of the journey. So, yeah.
I just want to thank you so much. The timing of this is so incredible because I did just come off this juice fast, and now I'm in a transition of refeeding and rebuilding my microbiome, which means my microbiome is essentially the same as a baby's right now. And so I have
Mm.
to re-raise it in a way that had never been done before for my optimal health. So the information that I put into my body, including food and spirituality in this podcast, is really about me re-raising myself. So I'm not surprised that this is the first podcast I've done since I broke the fast.
Yeah, it's so fun. I love how things align too. And I just keep trusting. I throw it out and just keep following the call. And I was like, let's dive into this. And now we're going to talk more stuff in the next episode. So, yeah, just grateful. Michelle, just want to say, like, grateful that you said yes and that you stepped into your light and that we could co create this together to serve humanity. Whoever listens to it got something from this. So yeah.
Thank you for being brave.
Hmm.
Is not all podcast hosts are willing to go into all areas. So I just want to thank you, because anybody who's brave in their transmissions is going to be a light worker for all people.
Yeah, I think, and I definitely have had people say that to me, like the word that they would use to describe me is brave. And I just keep stepping in, and I don't see it as anything but who I am. But yeah,
It's rare.
yeah,
I
thank
hate
you.
to say it, but it is a rare breed these days, and
Yeah.
it's going to become hopefully more commonplace, but right now it's rare. And so I'm just like, so my heart is like so warmed that people like you are around to do
Yeah,
this.
oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm a trailblazer in a different way. You know, some people are rah rah on the mountain with the flags, and I'm not. I'm in the background whispering to all the people so that they can step up onto their mountain. You know, like that's my job. You
Which
know,
is like changing the world.
it's just, yeah, like it's I've been saying this for years and didn't consciously understand it when I was started saying it, but it's like if I can help light your light, then you can go out and help the lights of others. But until you're lit, you're not lighting anyone. And I didn't get it at the time. And now I understand, as being like a soul mission activator, that that's my job, is how do I get more people lit up in the world, whether it's these conversations that shift energy, or it's the work I do, or it's the guy at the grocery store, or all of it, right? So yeah.
It's so important, and I'm so glad you're doing it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. So we've got to participate in life now, in the human experience. But guys,
Yes.
like I said, Michelle will be back. You will know when part 2 of this experience comes out, because we have so much more to talk about. And I'm going to leave you guys with some cliffhangers of some of this stuff on purpose. So you got to tune back in. And every week you got to watch to see what episode's dropping. But we're going to have her back on the podcast because I love this information, energy, all the things. And Michelle, just like so grateful again for you.
So grateful. Have a blessed day. And I really look forward to hearing this and being back.
Yes. And I can't wait for her to be back too. So guys, we'll see you guys all in the next episode. Well, we know that you like the podcast potentially because you're still here listening to this actual audio at this moment of time. So all that we're going to ask is, can you please just help us share it out? Take some friends, share it with a friend, help us spread the word, because each of us moving through together as we collaborate, as we move within this light warrior movement, helps each of us illuminate in lights. And we're just so grateful. I'm so grateful. The guests are always so grateful too, that you help us spread the word, that you help us really step into this space to be able to own all of our pathway. And we are just so grateful to have you here. And thank you again for listening.